Well, we can't talk about the final without talking about the beaten runner-up, a first Euro Tour final for Rowby-John Rodriguez, who missed one dart at tops in the decider for it. But will we look back on this weekend as one where Rowby-John Rodriguez showed his potential?
Yeah, I think we probably will, actually. And maybe you could point towards the World Cup last year, because that was when him and Mensah-Suljovic, they had that run to the final together with Austria, and we saw some of the performances that Rowby-John put in that weekend. The game against England sticks out in the memory, beating James Wade and Dave Chisnall, those two beating them in straight singles games. That was a very impressive win from those two. And maybe even the World Championship last year, he had that 97 average in the first round, and we think back to that time as well. Rowby-John Rodriguez wasn't a tour card holder. He didn't win his tour card back at Q School at the start of that year, but he did have a superb 2021, and I think he did an interview recently with the PDC, and he said that last year was one of his best ever years that he's had in darts because of the amount of confidence and belief that he got back into his game, the results that he was picking up. Okay, he said it himself, he didn't have any pressure on him last year because he didn't have that tour card, so he was going into all these Players' Championship events doing well, not having to worry about the rankings so much. But when it got to the World Championship and a tour card was essentially on the line, if he'd have got, I think it was maybe one or two more wins, he would have got that tour card. He would have been in the top 64 and he wouldn't have had to go to Q School. But he didn't get enough wins in that, and fair play to him because he dusted himself down. He went to Q School a few months later, and we had Mick Lang, his manager, on after Q School, and actually he reached out to us. He said, do you want me to come on and talk you through that dramatic final day of the European Q School when Rowby-John went out early, and it was a long wait to find out if he was going to keep that last spot on the Order of Merit. We saw players mismatch darts, players come very close to knocking him out of those spots. And it was a great story from Mick. Go and have a listen to it if you haven't already. And to get the tour card in those circumstances, and then as we've seen in the last few months, he really has kicked on, and we've seen him make a couple of quarterfinals on the Euro Tour, and also that the World Cup as well, having a few wins there as well. But I think getting to the final of a Euro Tour is a huge accomplishment for him, and the way he's done it as well, he's come through some close games in there. That the game against Madars Razma, coming through that in a last leg decider, and even in the first round beating Danny Noppert, the UK Open champion, 6-5. So he's come through some last leg deciders. The final in the end, that was just one last leg decider too much for him on this occasion, but we've seen from the weekend that he is someone that just relishes playing on the stage, and he is playing with so much confidence and belief in his game. And you've just got to look at the 180s that he's been throwing as well. And I was calling it the showman shot, and think back to the days of Peter Wright when he was breaking through end of 2013, and at Ali Pali he was revving up the crowd before going for a double to get them to make more noise. Rowby-John doing it with the 180s, and fair play to him, actually. He's getting that last start in the treble 20 more often than not. I'm not sure what the stat is from the weekend, but he was getting it a few times, so full credit to him. And yeah, he'll be gutted that he didn't win the title in the end. He had that dart at tops, and I think he had, 6 darts from 115 in the end in that decider, and to get one dart, he'd have probably fancied to get more darts, match darts, title darts than that. But it's put him in a good position. Of course, if he'd have won the title, he would have been in the World Match Play. It would have opened a lot more doors. But getting to the final, I think he can push on from this, and he's going to get another chance this weekend, another 4 chances to have a good run. And he's only £500 off the World Match Play, and that's not even a first round win, is it? I think you get £750 now. So he's well in the mix for the match play. And yeah, if he can take the confidence that he's had from this weekend and what he's done over the last, you'd probably say 18 months, then I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of Rowby-John Rodriguez, not just on the Euro Tour stage, but on the TV stages this year as well.
Well, you touched on something that I wanted to mention as well, the fact that he nearly was able to get in the top 64 last year without a tour card. And had he done that, his overall order merit wouldn't have reset to 0, obviously, but neither would have his Pro Tour order merit. And if you look at what he did from last year after the World Match Play through to the end of the year, there wasn't as many events. There were only a couple Euro Tour events. He didn't qualify for either of those. And there was only a handful of Players' Championship events, but he did, because of how dominant he was on the Challenge Tour, get into those. He won £4,500 in those Players' Championship events at the back end of last year. If you add that to his Pro Tour Order of Merit, he would be in one of the spots right now. He'd be ahead of both Ricky Evans and Ross Smith, who are tied for the last spot. Ross Smith ahead on Countback. He would be ahead of Adrian Lewis. He'd be ahead of Andrew Gilding. He'd be not safe in the world match play, but in a very good position entering these four. He'd be 3,250 pounds ahead of Adrian Lewis as opposed to the 500 he's behind. But fortunately for him, he didn't. But he didn't let that stop him. And this past weekend, we've just seen more of what we've seen, I was going to say all year, but I'll even say all of last year, because he's been a top 32 caliber player last year. That's why he almost got into the top 64 on just 1 year without even having a tour card. And he's obviously been able to kick on this year. That's why he's in the race. If you look at his performances in the Players' Championships this year, okay, he hasn't gotten any really big results, but he's playing at a very good standard, excluding players who've only played in a couple of the Players' Championship events this year. He's 30th in averages, averaging just a shade under 94. That's more than a point over his World Cup, or almost a point over his World Cup teammate Mensur Suljovic. It's almost 2 points over his brother Rusty Jake Rodriguez, who hasn't kicked on quite as well as Rowby has so far this year. And after a slow start to the season, where after the very first Players' Championship event, where over the next 6, he only won 2 matches and was averaging in the 80s as often as he was averaging in the 90s, he's really upped his game. And that's why now, as I said, he's 30th in the averages. That's why he's put himself in competition for the World Match Play. It's why he was able to get to the final of this Euro Tour event without being given a very easy draw. He started against the UK Open champion. Then he went against the former world number 1 and current world number 2. Then he went against the German number 1. He went against another former UK Open champion, Nathan Aspinall. And then he beat Mateusz Razma, who's had a breakthrough year and a half. And that's how he got to the final. And he had a dart to beat the guy who's been dominating the European Tour this year. That is just a brilliant run for Rowby-John Rodriguez in a draw that he opened up for himself by winning all those matches. Well, I can't really say if you go against the best player on current form on the Euro Tour, the draw opened up. But he opened up the draw by beating the top seed and beating everyone who he came across. It was really, really impressive. And, if he can get into the World Match Play, that will be the next stepping stone for him. Because 6 years ago, he entered the final weekend clinging to the final spot in the World Match Play field, but he got dropped out after having a bad final weekend and just missed out. That was 6 years ago, and he's been nowhere near that ever since. Obviously fell off the tour a couple of years ago, but was in danger of falling off the tour a few times previous to that. He's now back in that position 6 years later, and his game is so much more complete. His demeanor is so much better. He is a consummate professional now, and I think he will get the job done. We'll talk about that in a later question. But this was a big weekend because it's given him that opportunity, and it's one that I think he's now ready to seize. So to answer the question, did he show his potential? Yes. I think that potential is a top 32 player because, well, all the stats point that way, and he just needs one big week to get into the event that, in essence, is the top 32 players, the World Match Play.